With the looming threat of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs, a Buy Canadian movement has picked up across the country. You may have noticed it when you go into grocery stores or supply shops, a tag that tells you if the product you're about to pick up is made in Canada.
It's hard to imagine your favorite burger, soda, or even your sneakers becoming symbols of protest in another country. But in Canada, this has already happened. In 2025, Canadian consumers began quietly turning their backs on American products. Not with slogans, not with hashtags, but with a wallet-driven resistance. From fast food to tech, this economic rejection is reshaping industries on both sides of the border. So, which iconic U.S. brands are being mass boycotted in Canada, and why? Let's find out in today's video. Number 1. McDonald's. Once a staple across Canadian towns, McDonald's is now seeing a silent retreat. In 2025, Canadians began quietly stepping back, not through protests, but by simply not showing up. Local favorites like A&W and Harvey's gained ground as McDonald's traffic thinned out. According to Dunnhumby research, 71% of Canadians now plan to reduce purchases of U.S. food products, driven by rising trade tensions and trust issues. The ripple effect hit U.S. suppliers. Fry giants like Lamb Weston announced layoffs due to falling demand from Canadian outlets. Small-town burger joints, once struggling, are seeing renewed support as consumers ask, why feed billion-dollar U.S. brands when local farms are hurting? This movement isn't loud, but it's impactful. And when even fries lose favor, it sets the stage for bigger shifts, like perhaps an iconic American soda? Number 2. Coca-Cola. For decades, Coca-Cola wasn't just a drink in Canada, it was a cultural fixture. You'd find it at backyard barbecues, convenience stores, and vending machines from Vancouver to Halifax. But in 2025, something shifted. Canadians started skipping the Coke aisle, not out of dietary concerns, but out of quiet protest. The rise of nationalist consumer movements and backlash over U.S. trade policies triggered a widespread rethinking of purchasing habits. Canadians began scanning labels for domestic alternatives and gradually left Coca-Cola bottles untouched. Surveys showed a powerful trend. A large majority of Canadians now actively avoid American-made goods when a local substitute exists. Retailers took notice. Store shelves began promoting Canadian sodas more aggressively, while Coca-Cola's dominance slowly shrank. Even liquor stores in Ontario and Quebec reportedly reduced American soda imports. The message was clear: brand loyalty was no longer bulletproof, not when national sentiment entered the checkout line. And while Coca-Cola struggled to hold on to fridge space, the next product faced an even steeper fall from grace, because when the public turns on their favorite coffee, it gets personal. Number 3. Jack Daniels. By 2025, Jack Daniels went from being a staple in Canadian celebrations to quietly disappearing from shelves. In early March, provinces like Ontario, Nova Scotia, and British Columbia pulled U.S. spirits, including Jack Daniels, Jim Beam, and Tito's, from government-run liquor stores, a direct response to U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods. The Liquor Control Board of Ontario, LCBO, which typically sells nearly $1 billion worth of American alcohol annually, ceased restocking these products, amounting to over 3,600 items from 35 states being delisted. Sales of U.S. spirits plunged 66.3% nationally between March 5th and April's end. In Ontario alone, the drop reached a staggering 80%. Overall spirits purchases in Canada fell nearly 13%, even impacting domestic brands as fewer people shopped alcohol broadly. Brown-Forman, the maker of Jack Daniels, described the move as worse than a tariff, noting that such removal physically erases sales, not just adds costs. While Canada represents only about 1% of the company's global sales, the abrupt pull triggered layoffs and shelved stock back in Tennessee. This wasn't mere economics, it was symbolic. A brand once uncorked at milestones was abruptly rendered foreign in its strengths, and if even spirits are being shunned, what does that say about the trust still clinging to other everyday favorites? Number 4. Heinz Ketchup. For decades, the Heinz factory in Leamington, Ontario, was a symbol of local pride, processing over 250,000 tons of tomatoes each year and providing jobs to hundreds. But when Heinz shut it down in 2013, cutting loose nearly 740 workers, Canadians didn't forget. The closure struck a nerve, especially when French's stepped in to keep the town's tomato industry alive. Using the same Ontario-grown tomatoes, French's ketchup quickly gained popularity, not just for the taste, but for what it represented. In just a few years, Heinz's market share in Canada fell sharply, dropping from 84% to 76%. Even a decade later, the resentment is still fresh. On social platforms, Canadians often cite the factory closure as their reason for switching brands, proudly backing French's for staying loyal to Canadian farmers. Heinz has tried to win back hearts through ads emphasizing its Canadian presence, but the effort has done little to reverse the shift. The boycott is less about tomatoes and more about trust. Number 5. Tesla. Tesla used to be one of the most admired brands in Canada's EV market, especially in Quebec, which led the country in electric vehicle adoption. But by early 2025, the brand's Canadian image took a massive hit. Tesla registrations in Quebec crashed by 85% in just one quarter. The Model 3 and Model Y, once seen as sleek and affordable, experienced drops of over 90% in new sales. This wasn't just market fatigue. The collapse followed a decision by the Canadian government to freeze nearly $43 million in rebate payouts to Tesla. Officials raised concerns over eligibility abuse and compliance with federal EV policies. On top of that, Ottawa barred Tesla from future federal rebate programs altogether, citing tensions around trade policy and inconsistent support for Canadian auto manufacturing. Public sentiment quickly turned. In cities like Vancouver and Montreal, protesters began targeting Tesla showrooms, part of a growing international movement. Sales plummeted across provinces, with nationwide registrations down 67% in the first half of 2025. And just when you thought EVs were the future, Canadians decided even cookies could spark stronger loyalties. That brings us to the next product on the chopping block. Number 6. Oreo. Oreos have long been one of those comfort snacks tied to childhood and family, dubbed the world's best-selling cookie, available in over 100 countries. But this year in Canada, familiarity wasn't enough to keep them safe. Many consumers quietly began leaving Oreos behind, not due to a shift in flavor preference, but over a deeper trust issue: perceived outsourcing. A generation that grew up with the cookie now sees its move away from Canadian or even US production as a sign of brand disloyalty. In casual food forums and Reddit discussions, sentiment was clear. Why support something that left and came back like nothing happened? Oreo's move felt like a slap to small-scale Canadian factories, recalls one commenter. The emotional blow was enough that regional bakeries producing Canadian-labeled alternatives saw noticeable, if unlisted, gains in shelf space. The ripple effect hit U.S. operations too. A packaging plant in Illinois, once thriving on Canadian-bound Oreo orders, reportedly scaled back shifts due to softened demand. The message was unmistakable. Consumers now vote with their carts, and Oreos failed that implicit vote of loyalty. Trust once dipped isn't just about sugar and chocolate, it becomes about principle. And if a harmless cookie can send shockwaves through supply chains, what does that say about the brands that follow? Number 7. Netflix. Netflix used to be the digital hearth in Canadian living rooms, kids binging cartoons, families gathering for movie night, grandparents streaming from their armchairs. It wasn't just a service, it was a shared experience across households and provinces. But by 2025, that shared experience started falling apart. It all began when Netflix rolled out its password-sharing crackdown in Canada, insisting users set a primary location and pay extra for household members not living under the same roof. Surveys showed just how explosive the reaction was. 62% of those who shared passwords said they planned to cancel rather than pay for extra access. Word of mouth quickly spread. On forums, comments like, "My account was cheap and shared. Now there's no value," captured a growing sense of frustration beyond cost. That frustration wasn't limited to digital chatter. Actual cancellations followed. Many users walked away, calling the policy unfair to long-distance families and students. At the same time, streaming alternatives began gaining traction, fueled by viewers who felt Netflix had broken their trust. Below the surface, the fallout spread deeper. Canadian content producers, who relied on Netflix for international distribution, faced lost deals. some US-based studios stopped pursuing Canada-only contracts for fear of instability. The digital fireplace was still lit, but fewer people were gathered around. Number 8. Nike. Nike used to be more than just a brand in Canada. It was a symbol of athletic confidence, worn in classrooms, gyms, and city streets. But by mid-2025, that familiar swoosh had become a quiet red flag for many Canadian shoppers. The turning point? Ongoing reports connecting Nike's global supply chain to forced labor practices, particularly involving Uyghur workers in China. These concerns weren't brushed aside. Canada's Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise even opened a formal investigation into Nike's alleged complicity. The outrage wasn't loud, but it was steady. Canadian consumers started walking away from the brand, not because the products changed, but because the principles didn't seem to align. In online discussions and local retail feedback, the tone was firm. I can't wear something that might come from exploitation. Several store owners reported visible shifts, customers entering with interest but leaving once they saw the tag. Even discounts and fresh drops couldn't reverse the trend. More shoppers are now seeking ethical, local alternatives that support Canadian manufacturing or trusted European supply chains. Nike didn't just lose sales, it lost narrative control. And if a pair of sneakers can spark that level of rejection, imagine what happens when basic daily essentials come under scrutiny next. Number 9. American dairy products. Milk and dairy, once a basic grocery item, have turned into quiet symbols of loyalty during Canada's 2025 boycott wave. A recent survey found that 71% of Canadians plan to cut back on U.S. grocery products, with dairy among the hardest hit. National pride and rising political tensions are steering shoppers toward 100% Canadian milk labels, even at higher prices. Canada's supply management system plays a major role. Strict quotas and tariffs limit U.S. imports, making homegrown dairy more prominent on store shelves. Grocers are leaning into the trend, proudly promoting Canadian milk and cheese as both a quality and patriotic choice. Meanwhile, U.S. dairy exporters are seeing shrinking orders, with shipping routes and processing schedules scaled back. Politically, the Canadian government recently passed legislation to protect its supply system from trade negotiations, essentially locking out foreign competition. When even a glass of milk can reflect deeper national sentiment, it's clear this movement goes far beyond politics or economics. And just like that, another product joins the growing list of quiet resistance. Number 10. Amazon. Amazon's reputation in Canada took a major hit in early 2025 when it abruptly shut all 7 Quebec warehouses. The move cut 1,700 full-time, 250 temporary, and 2,800 delivery jobs, blaming a shift back to third-party logistics. But many saw it as retaliation against rising union activity. Outrage followed. Quebec's CSN union called for a national boycott. Thousands canceled Prime memberships, and Cancel Prime trended for days. Then came legal heat. A Montreal consumer launched a class action suit, saying Amazon could no longer guarantee 2-day delivery. Quebec's Labor Board also opened an investigation into whether unionized sites were targeted. In a country that values worker protections, Amazon's decision sparked not just economic fallout, but a deeper cultural rift. When convenience clashes with core values, even giants can fall from grace. This boycott isn't some past trend. It's happening right now in stores, on menus, and in everyday choices. American brands are feeling the pressure, and local businesses are riding the wave. What do you think? Will this momentum keep growing? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more real stories like this one. Thanks for watching, everybody.